Hello, friends. Night has already fallen, and the day was long and tiring. And now, it is time to rest. As always, I will tell you a kind legend that once took place in our beloved Middle-earth. So, settle in comfortably, gently close your eyes, and let our journey begin. The smoke of the First Age had long since drifted away, and the thunder of the War of Wrath was no more than an echo among the cold stones of Beleriand. The sea had swallowed kingdoms. The mountains themselves had bowed beneath the wrath of the Valar. Where once the halls of Morgoth had stood, there remained only twisted ruin, a blackened wasteland, broken and silent beneath the pale stars. Yet in that desolation, a strange light was said to flicker still, deep beneath the ashes of Angband. Many feared to speak of it. Those who had fought in that final war remembered the dreadful fire that had poured from the pits of Thangorodrim, and the unearthly gleam that burned in Morgoth's crown, the Silmarils, jewels wrought by Feanor, that even the Valar could not tame. All three were lost now, one to the sea, one to the depths of the earth, and one carried into the heavens. Yet whispers came to Gil-galad's court that something remained, a remnant of that holy flame. And so it was that a small company was gathered to seek the truth. Erendur of the Edain was their captain, a tall man of stern face and quiet courage. He had fought in the War of Wrath beside the hosts of the West, and though he was mortal, the elves held him in high regard. Beside him rode Lerion, an elf of the Farlas, swift of speech and sure of bow, and with them came 5 others, both elf and man, each bound by oath to see the work done. They departed from Lindon at dawn, when the mists still clung to the hollows, and the gulls cried faintly over the new shores of the world. The journey north was long and perilous. The lands of Beleriand were no more. What once had been forest and mountain now lay drowned beneath the sea. Only the far northern highlands, where Angband had stood, rose still above the waters, jagged and black. The company crossed broken plains of stone and ash where nothing grew. In that lifeless land, even the wind seemed weary. Yet the closer they drew to the ruins of Morgoth's stronghold, the more they felt it. A faint warmth upon the air, as of hidden fire beneath the ground. "Do you feel it?" Lerion murmured one night as they made camp among the cracked stones. "There is life yet in this place, but no life born of Eru." Erendur nodded. "Aye. Something waits below. If the tales are true, it may be what we seek, or what we should fear to find." When at last they reached the mouth of the pit, all fell silent. The ground was rent wide, as if by the hand of a god, and a black stairway wound down into shadow. The air that rose from it was heavy and hot, carrying the scent of metal and long-cooled flame. No bird flew there, nor any living thing stirred. Only the faintest glimmer shone from far within, like a single star burning beneath the earth. They descended slowly, their torches trembling in the dark. Around them loomed the remnants of Morgoth's forges, shattered anvils, twisted chains, and walls scarred by ancient fire. At length they came to a great hall, roofed in black stone. There, upon a broken dais, they found a small casket of iron half buried in dust. The lock was melted, the hinges fused, yet from within seeped that strange light, clear and cold, unlike any flame of this world. Lerion stepped forward first, awe and dread mingled upon his fair face. "Could it be?" he whispered. "A Silmaril?" Erendur shook his head. "No, those jewels are beyond reach of mortal hand. But perhaps a shard? A fragment of what once was? He drew his sword and pried the casket open. Instantly, the light burst forth, a radiant gleam that filled the hall as though the sun itself had awakened underground. The company shielded their eyes, for the brilliance pierced them like needles of glass. Yet in that light there was no warmth, only a fierce purity that made the air tremble. Within the shattered box lay a crystal shard no larger than a man's thumb, yet so bright that it seemed to burn the very shadows away. All were silent. Even the air held its breath. Then Eärendil reached out and took it in his hand. The light flared, and in that moment, those who looked upon his face saw something change in him. Wonder first, then yearning, then something deeper, darker, that none could name. He closed his fingers over the shard and said quietly, "We must bring it to Gil-galad. It is too perilous to leave here." No one spoke against him, though unease crept among them like a chill, for in the eyes of each was reflected that same terrible beauty, and none could forget it. They sealed the casket once more, wrapping it in cloth and binding it with cords of silver. Then they began the long climb back toward the light of day. But as they emerged from the ruins, a strange stillness settled upon the land. The sky above the ruins of Angband glowed faintly red, though no sun yet rose. A wind whispered across the black plain, carrying a voice that none could quite understand, like the sigh of something ancient, mourning what had been lost. Eärendil looked back only once. The fires of the north were dying, yet he thought he saw, far below in the pit, another glimmer answering the shard's light, as if the earth itself still remembered the hand that had shaped its doom. And though he did not speak of it, he felt a weight upon his heart, for already the shard was warm against his breast, and it seemed to pulse with a faint rhythm, like a living thing that would not rest. For many days they journeyed southward, away from the black scars of Angband, and toward the pale hills that once bordered Beleriand. The road was long and haunted by silence. No birds sang above them, no streams whispered beneath their feet. The world felt hollow there, as though the ruin of Morgoth had scorched not only stone and sky, but the very breath of the land itself. Eärendil bore the sealed casket upon his breast, bound by cords and wrapped in cloth, yet its light seemed to find every crack and fold. At night it shone faintly through the wrappings, glimmering like a star hidden beneath his cloak. Often his companions caught him gazing at it when he thought they slept. The light would reflect in his eyes, pale, cold, and unblinking. Laerion was the first to speak of it. "Captain," he said one night, as they rested beside the dry bed of a vanished river, "you guard that relic as though it were a jewel of your house. Do you not fear its fire?" Eärendil turned to him. "I fear many things," he replied softly. "But this is not evil. It was wrought in the light of the two trees, before Morgoth defiled the world. It is a remnant of what was pure." Laerion frowned. "Yet even that which is pure may be perilous, if it is taken from its rightful place. The Silmarils brought ruin to elf and man alike. Will you say this shard is safer?" Eärendil's gaze grew distant. "Perhaps not. But if it may be turned to healing, if some fragment of that holy fire could cleanse the darkness that remains in Middle-earth, should we not at least try?" Laerion had no answer. The wind sighed across the plain, stirring the ashes of long-dead forests, and the company slept uneasily. On the fifth night, a strange mist crept upon them, thick and low, veiling the stars. Shapes seemed to move within it, faint glimmers like pale hands reaching through the haze. The horses grew restless, stamping and snorting, and one of the Edain cried out that he had heard a whisper in the fog, calling him by name. Erendur drew his blade and called the company to arms. "Stand close," he commanded. "This is no natural mist." Out of the fog there came a chill unlike any wind. The torches sputtered and dimmed. Then, faintly, a shape appeared, a figure cloaked in grey, its face hidden by a hood. Its voice was soft, yet it carried clear through the night. "Why do you bear what was lost?" it asked. "The flame you hold was not meant for mortal hands." Larion raised his bow. "Name yourself, spirit, or begone." The figure lifted its head. Beneath the hood shone eyes like moonlight upon water. "Once I was of the Noldor," it said. "I sought the light of the Silmarils and perished for it. The curse of Mandos holds my spirit here, bound to the ruin of the north. You wake the old fire again, and it will consume you, as it did us all." At those words, Erendur stepped forward, though his men tried to hold him back. "If you know of this shard," he said, "tell me its nature. Is it of Feanor's making? Can it be unmade?" The ghostly form wavered like smoke. "It cannot be unmade by any hand in Middle-earth," it whispered. "Its light is a fragment of the flame imperishable, the very breath of creation. To hold it is to hunger for what no mortal may possess." Then, as swiftly as it had come, the mist drew back, and the figure was gone. The torches flared bright once more, and the stars reappeared, cold and distant above them. For a long while, none spoke. At last, Larion said, "We should bury it where none can find it." But Erendur's face was pale and stern. "No," he said. "If it is what that spirit claimed, then it must not be left to chance. We bring it to Gil-galad, as sworn. He will know the will of the Valar better than we." Larion looked at him long, but said no more. Yet in his heart, mistrust had taken root. They travelled onward through the wrecked Northlands, where rivers had turned to chasms and hills to islands. Twice they were forced to turn back from ground that crumbled beneath their feet. Once they crossed a valley where molten stone still smouldered beneath the earth, lighting their path with a dull red glow. All the while, the shard pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat under Erendur's cloak. When they reached the remnants of the Sirion Valley, they halted to rest. It was there that the first shadow of doom fell among them. One of the younger Edain, a man named Tathor, crept close to Erendur's pack as the captain slept. The shard's light leaked through the wrappings, and it called to him with a voice like the sea. He reached out, trembling to touch it, and cried out in pain. The others woke to find him writhing, his hand blistered and blackened as though by flame. "It burned me," he gasped. "The light burned me." Erendur tore the cloth away from his chest, clutching the casket close. His face was stricken, yet his voice was cold. "You should not have touched what was not yours." Larion knelt by Tathor, binding his hand with a strip of linen. Then he turned to Erendur. "You see now, it harms even those who draw near. Will you still bear it further?" Erendur's jaw tightened. "I will, until Gil-galad commands otherwise." That night, none could sleep. The shard's light pulsed faintly within the casket, as though aware of their fear. When dawn came, the air felt heavy and still, and a shadow of weariness hung over them all. As they marched again, Larion walked apart, silent and watchful. He saw how Erendur's hand often strayed to his breast, how his gaze lingered on the horizon, as if he beheld things unseen by others. Once at sunset, Larion caught him murmuring to the casket, words soft and fervent, as one might speak to a living friend. When questioned, Erendur laughed it off. "The light steadies me, he said. "It reminds me that there is still beauty in this marred world." But Larion did not laugh. In that moment, he thought he saw, behind Erendur's calm eyes, a glint that was not wholly his own, the reflection of something far older and more perilous than any man could master. And though the westering sun painted the sky in gold and crimson, Larion felt a chill deep within his heart, for he knew the truth of the spirit's warning. The shard was no gift. It was a trial, one that would soon demand its price. The days that followed were heavy with unease. Clouds gathered over the western sky, and the company moved beneath their grey shadow as though beneath a shroud. The air grew colder, though the season should have turned toward warmth, and the cries of distant gulls gave way to silence. Even the horses began to falter, their breath steaming in the gloom. Erendur rode ahead, his cloak drawn close, and the casket bound tight to his chest. His companions no longer spoke freely with him, for he seemed changed. His voice, once calm and clear, now carried a strange fervor when he spoke of the shard and its light. "The Valar left us to darkness after the war," he said one evening, as they camped by a ruined tower, half buried in the earth. "Perhaps this flame is meant to guide us anew. Think of it, a light untainted by shadow, a fire that could rekindle the fading hope of men." Laerion sat apart, cleaning his blade. "Hope that burns too bright may blind the one who bears it," he said quietly. Erendur's gaze flicked to him, sharp and quick as a blade. "You mistrust me, elf," he said, "but you forget. I have fought beside your kind, bled beside you. I do this not for myself, but for all free peoples." Laerion met his eyes. "And yet the fire you hold consumes you, as surely as the oath consumed the sons of Feanor. I have seen that light before. None who coveted it remained unscarred." Erendur said nothing more, but his hands tightened on the casket. That night, as the others slept, Larion awoke to see the captain standing alone, the box open before him. The shard blazed with a light so pure it seemed to drive the stars from the sky. It bathed Erendur's face in silver fire, and for a heartbeat, Laerion thought he saw behind the man's features the faint shimmer of something vast, as though a greater will had touched him. "Erendur," he whispered. The captain turned, startled. The box snapped shut. For a long moment they faced one another in silence. Then Erendur said softly, "You fear it. Perhaps you are right too. But you do not understand. This light, it speaks. It tells me what must be done." "What voice speaks from that fire?" Larion asked. "There are whispers in this world that wear fair shapes, but their hearts are blackened by pride." Erendur smiled faintly. "Not this one. This is no lie. It shows me the world as it was, green and fair before the breaking of the trees. If I can guard this shard, if I can learn its will, perhaps we may restore a part of that lost light." Larion took a step closer. "Then share the burden if it must be borne. Let us take turns keeping it, as brothers." But Erendur's hand went to his sword. "No, it has chosen me." The words were quiet, yet they struck Larion like a blow. He saw then the truth he had feared. Erendur was no longer merely guarding the shard. He was bound to it. When dawn came, the company found that Erendur had ordered them to change course. Instead of turning west toward Lindon, he led them south, into lands yet wild and unclaimed. When questioned, he said only that he sought a safer road, for the mountains ahead were broken by the war and impassable. But Larion knew better. That night he spoke in secret with the others, warning them of what he had seen. Some, weary and fearful, agreed that Erendur's mind was no longer his own. Yet others, moved by the captain's words and courage, refused to believe ill of him. So division grew among them, and with it suspicion. 2 nights later, as they crossed a ravine choked with mist, Laerion's fears came to pass. Tathor, his wounded hand still bandaged, slipped away from the camp and followed Erendur's watchfire. He had begun to dream of the light, seeing it behind his eyelids whenever he closed his eyes. It called to him, promising healing, strength, and vision beyond mortal sight. When he reached the fire, he found Erendur awake, the casket open again. The shard glowed between his palms like a living star. "Tathor," said Erendur without turning, "you came to steal it again." The young man froze. "No, my lord. I only wished to see. It spoke to me." "It speaks to all who would listen," Erendur murmured. "But not all are chosen to bear it." Then he turned. The light of the shard burned behind his eyes. "Go back to your rest." But Tathor took a step forward. "Let me touch it, just once. Let me see what you see." Erendur's expression softened, almost sorrowful. "You would die, Tathor." "I would risk it," the man whispered. For a heartbeat, Erendur hesitated. Then he drew the casket close. "So be it," he said, and opened his hand. The light struck them both. Tathor gave a cry, but it was not of pain. It was of wonder, of joy too great for a mortal heart. His face shone as though he beheld the light of Aman itself, and then his body crumpled, falling lifeless at Erendur's feet. The others found them thus at dawn. Erendur knelt beside the dead man, his face calm and unreadable. "He reached for what was forbidden," he said quietly. "The shard's fire is not for mortal flesh." Laerion's grief turned to anger. "And yet you live, unburned. What does that make you?" Erendur rose, his shadow long in the morning light. "It makes me the one destined to bear this burden, until the end of my strength." From that hour, none dared to challenge him. They followed where he led, though their hearts grew heavy. The land itself seemed to darken as they went. Clouds thickened, the grass turned pale, and a strange still glow hung at the edge of the horizon, as though the world watched them in silence. At last, after many weary leagues, they came upon a high ridge overlooking the western sea. Below lay cliffs jagged as teeth, and far off, waves broke against them in slow, thunderous rhythm. There Erendur halted. "It ends here," he said. "I will go no farther. The light must return to the sea, to the place where the Valar may find it." But Laerion, seeing the fever in his eyes, knew the truth. The man did not mean to cast it away. He meant to test his strength against it, to see if he could master the fire itself. That night, Laerion made ready. He swore that before another dawn rose, either the shard would be unbound, or both he and Erendur would perish beside it. And in the distance, as the waves broke upon the cliffs, a pale light shimmered on the water, as though the sea itself had begun to stir. Night deepened over the cliffs, and the restless sea hurled its voice against the rocks below. A storm gathered far to the west, a line of black cloud veined with lightning where the last of the sun had died. The air was heavy with salt and foreboding. Among the jagged stones, the company made camp, weary, silent, and divided. Laerion kept to the edge of the firelight, his bow across his knees. He had not spoken to Erendur since the death of Tathor, and though no words were uttered, the others could feel the rift between them widening. The shard lay once more within its iron casket, resting near Erendur's side. Even through the wrappings it gleamed faintly, a single pulse of white radiance that seemed to answer the storm above. None could sleep. Some watched the sea, thinking of home and of those who had perished in the war. Others whispered that they should turn back and leave this cursed relic to the deep. But Eärendor would not yield. "Tomorrow," he said, his eyes fixed upon the dark horizon, "we finish what we began. This shard was never meant for the earth. I will return it to the waters, where no shadow of Morgoth can ever reach it." Laerion rose slowly, the wind tugging at his cloak. "And do you think it will let you? You have felt its will, Captain. You know it clings to life, to you. You cannot cast it away." Eärendor's hand went to the casket, as though in reflex. "You speak as one who has never borne a true burden. I will do what must be done. It is not for you to judge me." "You are wrong," Laerion said quietly. "It is for me, for all of us. You swore to bring it before Gil-galad. Instead, you lead us to ruin." The company stirred uneasily, their eyes moving from one to the other. The tension between man and elf was a drawn bowstring, waiting only a breath to break. But before Eärendor could answer, a sudden gust swept through the camp. The fire shuddered and went out, plunging them into darkness. For a moment, the only light was that which leaked from the casket. It glowed brighter now, as though awakened by their strife. The light spilled between the bindings, cold and clear, illuminating the rocks with a spectral sheen. Laerion's voice was a whisper in the dark. "Do you see, Captain? It feeds upon our discord." But Eärendor did not answer. His gaze was fixed upon the casket, and in his eyes burned the reflection of that light, fierce and unyielding. Slowly, as though compelled by unseen hands, he reached to untie the cords. "Eärendor!" Laerion cried, drawing his blade. Too late. The bindings fell away, and the shard rose from the casket, weightless, floating above Eärendor's hands. The light was no longer gentle. It blazed like molten silver, and the air trembled as if struck by thunder. The company staggered back, shielding their faces. Eärendor's voice rang out, strange and terrible. "Behold the fire that the Valar themselves could not tame. This is the heart of creation. The light before the world was broken." "Cast it away," Laerion shouted. "Eärendor, you must not." But the wind swallowed his words. The shard spun in the air, wrapping Eärendor in a halo of living fire. His cloak was torn from him, his hair whipped by the storm, and he laughed, not with madness, but with a terrible joy. Then the earth shook, the cliffs quivered beneath their feet, and from the depths below came a roar like the voice of the sea itself, answering the defiance of man. Lightning split the sky, and in that white flash, Laerion saw Eärendor standing at the brink, arms lifted high, the shard blazing between his palms. "I will master it," he cried. "By the flame of Eru, I will make it serve the light of men." Laerion leapt forward, his sword drawn. "No one should wield this power." He struck the casket from Eärendor's grasp, but the shard clung to its bearer as if alive. The two struggled upon the edge, the storm raging around them. Sparks flew from the shard where their hands touched it, searing both. Laerion's blade clattered to the stone. "Let it go, Eärendor!" he shouted above the thunder. "It will destroy you!" Eärendor's face was lit with a pale fire. "It cannot destroy what it has chosen!" The wind screamed. The rock beneath them cracked. And then, with a sound like glass shattering, the shard burst into fragments of light. One piece struck Laerion's arm, burning through cloth and skin. Another struck Eärendor in the breast. He staggered backward, clutching his chest, where the light sank into him and vanished. The storm fell silent. Only the hiss of the waves below remained. Eärendor stood motionless at the cliff's edge. His companions dared not move. When at last he turned, his eyes shone with the same light that had burned in the shard. His voice was low, distant, as though spoken from far away. "It is gone," he said, "but not lost." Laerion took a cautious step forward. "What have you done?" "I have bound it," Erendur murmured. "It cannot be destroyed, but it can be contained. In me." He placed a trembling hand over his heart, where faint light still glimmered beneath the skin. "Its fire will fade, in time. Until then, I will bear it, into the sea." Laerion's breath caught. "If you go into the sea, you will die." Erendur smiled faintly. "Perhaps that is mercy." Before any could stop him, he turned and walked toward the brink. The wind tore at his cloak, the sea raged below, and still he went on, step by step, as though drawn by a power greater than his own. "Erendur!" Laerion cried once more. "Come back!" The man looked back only once. His eyes were calm now, and in their depths burned a light unearthly, pure and sorrowful. "Tell Gil-galad," he said, "that no one should wield this power. Not elf, nor man, nor any born beneath the stars." Then he stepped forward and was gone. The sea rose up with a roar, swallowing the cliffside in white foam. When the waves fell back, there was no sign of him, only the whisper of the tide and the echo of his words. Laerion sank to his knees, staring into the churning dark below. And there, far beneath the waves, he thought he saw for an instant a gleam, a single point of light sinking ever deeper, until it vanished into the shadowed heart of the sea. When dawn came, the storm was gone. The cliffs lay silent, washed clean by rain. Of Erendur, nothing remained, save a faint trace of silver dust upon the stones where he had stood, glimmering softly in the newborn light. And Laerion, gazing upon it, whispered the truth that would be carried through the ages. No one should wield this power. No one. Long were the years that followed, and the tale of Erendur of the Edain passed into legend. Yet among those who had ridden with him, none forgot the terror and the wonder of that night upon the cliffs. They buried what little remained of their captain's gear and raised no cairn, for the sea had claimed him utterly. Then, heavy of heart, they turned eastward, back toward Lindon, bearing tidings that no tongue wished to tell. The road was long and grim. Rain fell often, and mist veiled the lands that had once been fair. Laerion rode at their head, silent and grim. His arm, burned by the shard's light, was bound in cloth, yet the wound would not heal. It throbbed with a faint glow in darkness, as though the fire that had struck him still lived beneath the skin. He spoke little of it, but at night he would stare into the flame of the campfire, seeing within it the image of Erendur's face, calm, resolute, and doomed. At last they came to the green shores of Lindon, where the sea lay gentle and grey beneath a rising sun. The towers of Gil-galad stood gleaming upon the heights, and banners of blue and silver stirred in the breeze. Yet there was no joy in their coming. The guards at the gate, seeing the grief upon their faces, led them in silence to the king. Gil-galad, High King of the Noldor, received them in his hall of white stone. His eyes were keen and clear, and though he spoke kindly, there was a shadow of foreboding in his gaze. Círdan the shipwright stood beside him, his beard silver as foam. Laerion knelt and laid before them the empty casket that had once held the shard. "My lord," he said, "the light we sought is gone. It could not be tamed nor returned. Erendur gave his life to cast it into the sea." Gil-galad looked long upon the casket, then at Laerion's wounded arm, and sighed. So ends the folly of those who reach for the fire of the gods. Yet it was not folly alone. Perhaps in his death, your captain achieved what none of us could, the binding of that which should never have been found. Círdan nodded slowly. The sea remembers all things. If he cast the light into its depths, it will not fade. It will lie hidden until the breaking of the world. Laerion bowed his head. He was a brave man, but the shard's fire left its mark upon us all. My men dream of it still. And I... He hesitated, his voice faltering. I fear it may not be wholly gone. At this, Gil-galad's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Laerion unbound his arm. The skin beneath was pale and scarred, but from within the wound, a faint white glow pulsed, steady as a heartbeat. A murmur ran through the hall. I touched the light when it broke, Laerion said. It entered me as it did him. I have felt its whisper in my sleep, calling, always calling from the deeps. For a long moment, none spoke. Then the king rose. You will not bear this alone, he said. We will call upon the lore of the Eldar and the wisdom of the Valar, if any answer may yet come across the sea. And so began a long watch. Laerion remained in Lindon, dwelling in a small house near the shore. The healers of the elves tended him, yet the light in his arm did not fade. Nights he would walk by the water, gazing westward, and more than once he thought he saw a gleam far out upon the waves, a single spark, flickering beneath the surface, like a star drowned but not extinguished. Whispers spread among the sailors that something had changed in the sea. The tides grew stronger. Strange lights glimmered beneath the foam. Fish fled from certain coasts, and gulls cried in the night as though mourning. Some said Erendor's spirit wandered still, bound to the shard's flame. Others claimed the light was the mercy of the Valar, guiding lost mariners home. But Laerion knew the truth lay somewhere between hope and fear. He could feel it stirring within him, faint as the first breath of dawn. Years passed. One by one, the companions of that doomed journey departed, some sailing west, others fading into the hidden places of the world. Laerion alone remained, burdened by memory. He grew older in heart, though his body changed a little, for the fire within him warded off time's decay. Then, one night beneath a new moon, the sea grew restless. The wind turned cold, and waves began to crash upon the rocks with a sound like weeping. Laerion stood upon the shore, his cloak whipping in the gale, and saw, far out upon the black waters, a light rising. It burned white and terrible, brighter than any star, yet deep and sorrowful, as though the sea itself were aflame. The light drew nearer, and the waves stilled before it. Laerion's heart hammered in his chest. He fell to his knees as the voice came, faint but clear, borne upon the wind. Laerion! It was Erendor's voice. He lifted his head, tears streaming down his face. My friend, he whispered, what have you become? The light flared once more, and he saw, for an instant, the shape of a man standing upon the water, radiant and calm. The sea lay smooth beneath his feet, and in his breast shone a shard of purest fire. Do not grieve, said the voice. The fire sleeps now, bound within the deep. But beware, it will not rest forever. One day the world will seek it again, and the curse of the Silmarils shall rise anew. Laerion reached out, crying, Then let me bear it in your stead. Do not leave the burden to the sea. But the vision was already fading. The light sank slowly beneath the waves until all was darkness. Only the echo of Erendor's words remained, mingling with the sound of the tide. Laerion bowed his head. The glow in his arm dimmed at last, flickering once before vanishing entirely. He felt suddenly hollow, freed, yet bereft of something he had carried too long. When dawn came, the storm had passed, and the sea lay still as glass. But upon the shore, half buried in wet sand, he found a single object, a fragment of crystal, dull and lifeless, no larger than a seed. He took it up, and it felt cold in his palm. No light stirred within it now. Larion looked westward, toward the unseen shores of Valinor. "Rest, Erendur," he said softly. "May the Valar guard your flame until the end of days." He carried the fragment to Gil-galad's court and set it before the king. "The fire is quenched," he said. "Its keeper is gone, and its memory should fade." Gil-galad regarded it long, then covered it with a cloth. "Let it be hidden," he said, "not in pride or greed, but in warning. For no one should wield this power, not while the world endures." And so it was done. The shard of Erendur was sealed in a chest of stone and laid deep beneath the king's halls, guarded by silence and time. But sailors still say that, on moonless nights, a pale light drifts far below the waters of the Western Sea, a remnant of the fire that once defied the gods. And when the waves whisper against the shore, it is said they carry a voice faint and sorrowful, repeating the words that ended one age and warned the next. No one should wield this power. The years rolled onward, and memory softened into song. The story of Erendur became a tale murmured by sailors beneath starlight, or sung by the harpers of Lindon in hushed tones. They spoke of the mortal captain who defied the sea, and of the light that sank with him, never quenched. Yet few among the Eldar or the Edan knew the truth entire, and fewer still dared to seek it. Laerion, the last of that fateful company, lived on in quiet solitude by the western shores. Time passed gently upon him, yet his heart never ceased to dwell on that night of fire and storm. Though the wound upon his arm had long since faded, the sea called to him still in dreams, not as a curse, but as a beckoning voice from far beyond mortal hearing. Each year, on the eve of midsummer, he would walk alone along the strand beneath the cliffs where Erendur had vanished. There he would stand until the tide turned, watching the waves glimmer with the pale reflection of starlight. And sometimes, in the stillness before dawn, he thought he saw deep beneath the water a glimmer that pulsed faintly, like a sleeping heart. Yet peace is not easily won in Middle-earth. Rumors began to drift north from the southern lands, of strange fires burning beneath the sea, of mariners lost to lights that danced upon the water, of dreams sent to the minds of men that drove them toward the west. The old fear, long buried, stirred again. One evening, as the red sun sank into the sea, Laerion was summoned to Gil-galad's hall. The king stood beside the high window, gazing westward, his face grave. Círdan the shipwright was with him, his eyes shadowed by thought. "Laerion," said Gil-galad, "you once bore witness to the power that was sealed beneath the waves. Now it stirs again. Ships returning from the south report that the sea glows at night, and the wind carries voices none can understand. Some of my mariners have vanished, as though drawn beneath the surface." Larion bowed his head. "The fire wakes, my lord. Erendur's warning spoke of this, that the world would not let such power sleep forever." Círdan spoke then, his voice slow and deep as the tide. "It is said that the Valar bind all things to their appointed ends, yet even they cannot unmake the fire that was kindled before Arda. If the shard's essence remains, it may be calling to kindred flame, or to hearts yet hungry for its light." Gil-galad turned to Larion. "You alone have felt its touch and lived. Will you go once more to the place where Erendur fell and learn what truth lies beneath the waters?" Larion hesitated. The thought of returning to that haunted shore filled him with dread, yet duty bound him still. "I will go," he said at last. though I swore never again to seek that light. The next dawn found him upon the shore, with a small vessel prepared by Círdan's folk. The shipwright himself came to bid him farewell. "The sea holds many secrets," said Círdan, "but none more perilous than those born of pride and sorrow. Remember that not all lights are meant to be followed." Laerion smiled faintly. "I have learned that lesson well, Lord. I seek not to claim the light, only to learn what it desires." Then he set forth alone, rowing westward into the grey expanse. The wind was calm, the waters smooth as glass. No gulls followed him, no wave disturbed the mirrored surface. As night fell, the stars appeared above him, reflected perfectly below, so that it seemed he sailed between two skies. He drifted far from land. The moon rose, pale and cold, and the sea grew strange beneath its light. Then, faintly at first, he saw it, a shimmer beneath the surface, moving like a flame through deep water. It glided toward him, growing brighter, until the waves themselves began to glow. "Laerion." The voice came again, the same that had called to him years before. He stood in his boat, trembling. "Erendur," he whispered. And there, rising from the depths, came the figure of his old captain, veiled in light. The sea streamed from his hair, yet his face was calm, his eyes filled with sorrow. In his breast burned the shard, as bright as when first it had been found. "The time of peace is ending," said the spirit. "The fire stirs, and not even the valor can still it now. The hearts of men have grown bold, and they will seek again the forbidden flame. Already some sail in secret, dreaming of power and dominion." Laerion bowed his head. "Can nothing be done? Will it rise once more to ruin the world?" "The fire was made to create, not to rule," Erendur said. "But creation and destruction are twins that none may sunder. The light that built the world burns yet in the deep places. If men awaken it, it will answer, not in mercy, but in remembrance of the hand that defied it." He reached out a glowing hand. "Take this warning to Gil-galad. Tell him that the fire of the Silmarils has not perished. It sleeps, and it dreams." Laerion reached forward, but his fingers met only water. The vision faded like mist, and the sea was dark again. Yet when he looked down into the depths, he saw a glow far below, vast and shifting, like a star reflected in endless glass. He turned his boat and rowed back toward the faint glimmer of the eastern shore. The journey was long, and when he reached Lindon, many days had passed. The king received him once more in his hall, and Laerion told all that he had seen. For a time there was silence. Then Gil-galad spoke. "If the fire cannot be quenched, it must be guarded. We shall forbid all voyages far westward, save those bound for Aman by the grace of the valor. Let none seek the light, for it is not ours to command." Thus was the sea declared forbidden, and the mariners of Middle-earth turned eastward again. Yet still, upon clear nights, strange fires were seen far out upon the horizon, dancing like white stars upon the waves. Laerion remained in Lindon until the end of his days, watching the sea, but never again venturing upon it. He grew older, yet no sign of age touched his form. The touch of the fire had left him half apart from time. Some said he had become one of the fading, not wholly of the Eldar, nor of men, but something between. When at last he passed beyond the circles of the world, his body was laid to rest upon the same shore where Erendur had vanished. And in the night that followed, the sea shone brighter than any living eye had seen before. Círdan stood upon the cliffs, his silver beard stirred by the wind, and murmured, "So ends the last watcher. The sea keeps its secrets still." Yet deep beneath the waves, The fire slept, neither lost nor free, waiting for the day when the world would burn anew and the song of creation would rise once more. And though ages would pass before that time, the warning of Eärendil endured in the hearts of the wise. No one should wield this power, not now, not ever. Centuries passed, and the world changed. The great lands that had once bordered the sea of the west were swallowed by time, and new kingdoms rose upon the ruins of the old. Yet though the names of men and realms were forgotten, the sea remained, deep, watchful, and unquiet. The mariners of later ages told tales of the ghost light, a pale gleam that moved far beneath the waters when the night was still. Some said it was the reflection of the moon. Others whispered that it was the soul of a man who had defied the valor. The wise of Lindon, who kept the oldest lore, said nothing, for in the deep vaults of Gil-galad's line, long after his passing, the stone chest still lay sealed, the relic of the shard, cold and dormant. But nothing of fire sleeps forever. It was in the days when the realm of Númenor was young and strong that the sea once more began to stir. Sailors who ventured too far west spoke of strange lights flickering beneath the waves, and their dreams were filled with voices that whispered of glory and power. Among those who heard such whispers was Amandil of Hyaristar, a captain of renown, bold of heart and hungry for knowledge. Amandil was of noble birth, and though he honored the Valar in word, he was restless beneath their laws. He had heard from the lore-masters tales of a hidden flame lost in the northern seas, a remnant of the light that once kindled the stars. In secret, he gathered maps and charts, seeking to trace the path once taken by Eärendil of old. Many counseled him against it. "Leave such matters to the elder days," said his friend, Elentire. "The fire that burns beyond the world was not meant for us." But Amandil only smiled. "If the Valar deem us unworthy, let them say so themselves. I would see with my own eyes what light yet lingers beyond the reach of shadow." And so, in the waning days of summer, he set sail with 3 ships, steering north by the stars. The winds were fair, and the seas calm. Yet, as they drew near, the ancient waters, once cursed by the war of the Valar, the air grew heavy, and the waves began to shine faintly at night. On the 7th day, the lookout saw a pale glow spreading beneath the sea, not the light of dawn, but something colder, older, and far deeper. The water itself seemed alive, pulsing with silver fire. Amandil stood at the prow, his heart aflame. "Behold," he cried, "the light of the beginning, hidden since the making of the world." But Elentire trembled. "Captain, this is no gift. Turn back, for that fire burned even the blessed of the Valar." Amandil did not heed him. He ordered the ships to drop anchor and lowered a small boat, taking with him only a few of his boldest men. They rowed toward the heart of the light. The sea grew eerily still, the waves no longer broke, and their oars made no sound. Then, without warning, the glow burst forth, and a pillar of white flame rose from the deep, blazing into the heavens. The men fell upon their faces, crying out in terror. Amandil alone remained standing, his eyes fixed upon the fire. Within it he saw shapes, visions of lands unbroken, of stars newly kindled, of the Valar walking in the light of the 2 trees. A voice came to him from the flame, clear as the song of 1,000 harps. "Why have you come, child of men?" Amandil fell to his knees. "To behold the light that was lost, and to claim its wisdom for my people." "The wisdom of the fire cannot be claimed," said the voice. "It is the breath of creation, the spark that gives life to all things. To hold it is to hold the heart of Ea itself." Still Amandil's pride would not yield. "Then teach me to serve it. Let me bear its light, as the great ones did of old." There was silence, then a sound like the sighing of the sea. "Another has spoken those words before," the voice said. "He was burned, and the sea took him. You are his echo." Amandil lifted his head, his eyes wide. "Erendur." The flame flickered, and within it he saw a shadowed form, the figure of a man crowned with light, his face both sorrowful and stern. "The shard was cast into the deep," said the voice of Erendur. "It sleeps still, bound by my will. Seek it no further, for its fire is not for the hands of men." But the light drew Amandil like a moth to flame. He stretched out his hand, and the sea heaved as though in pain. "If it can heal the world, then I must take it," he cried. Erendur's image reached toward him, desperate. "Do not." Too late. Amandil's fingers touched the surface of the light. There was a sound like thunder beneath the sea, and the sky darkened. The fire burst outward, searing the air with brilliance beyond sight. The men in the boat were flung back into the water, their cries lost to the wind. When the light faded, the sea was still once more. The small boat drifted empty. Only Amandil remained, standing upon the waves, his eyes ablaze with white fire. The surviving sailors, watching from the ships, fell to their knees in dread. They heard his voice carried across the water, no longer human, but filled with the echo of power beyond the world. "I see it now," he said. "I see the song that binds all things. I am flame and sea, shadow and light." Then he turned his gaze toward them, and in his eyes burned a reflection of the Silmarils themselves. "Go," he commanded. "Tell them the fire lives again." The sailors fled, raising their anchors and steering south with the wind screaming behind them. None looked back, for the sea behind them burned with pale fire, spreading like dawn across the waves. When at last they reached Numenor, they found their hair white and their faces aged, as though years had passed in a single night. They told their tale before the king, but few believed them. The ships of Amandil were never seen again. Yet sometimes, when the moon is hidden and the wind comes cold from the west, the fishermen of Numenor would see a gleam far out upon the horizon, a single burning light that moved with the tide, too bright for any star. And in their hearts they would remember the words whispered by the waves, the same that had haunted Erendur and Larion before them. No one should wield this power. Still, the hearts of men are ever drawn to flame, and even in fear they dream of mastering it. Thus the sea kept its secret, and the fire waited, patient, eternal, until the next hand reached toward the light. Years rolled onward in the Isle of Numenor, and though Amandil's ships were long gone, the whispers of his fate endured. The sea was spoken of with fear. Mariners crossed themselves when its western horizon grew pale with strange light. Yet, as all things fade from dread to legend, so too did the tale of the ghost fire pass into rumor. It was said that in the reign of Tar-Meneldur, the king who loved the stars, the seas were calm once more, and the hearts of men turned again to their ancient longing, to reach the lands beyond the sunset. For the Edain, though mighty and wise, were still mortal, and in them burned that restless fire which no gift of the valor could wholly tame. Among those of that time was a young mariner named Valandor, grandson to one of the sailors who had returned from Amandil's doomed voyage. In his childhood, he had sat upon his grandfather's knee and listened to the tale of the burning sea, of the man who had touched the fire of the gods and vanished into light. To most it was a warning. To Valandor it was a call. He was a dreamer, with eyes that seemed to seek something beyond the world. When others looked upon the west with reverence, he looked with longing. Often he would climb to the high cliffs of Ondunia and gaze across the silver horizon, his heart stirring with a yearning he could not name. The sea holds more than memory, his grandfather had told him once. It hides what the Valar would keep from us. But beware, boy. The fire beneath the waves is not ours to claim. Still, the words only deepened his curiosity. When he came of age, Valandor became a sailor under the banner of the House of Andunia. He learned the moods of wind and tide, the stars' language, and the hidden currents of the Western Ocean. None could match his daring, though many called him reckless. And in time, his fame reached even the ears of Tar Meneldur himself, who loved the mariners and the lore of the heavens. The king summoned him to Armenelos, saying, "You are bold, Valandor, and your eyes are fixed where few dare to look. Yet remember this, beyond the sea lies the undying lands, and no mortal foot may tread there. Seek not the forbidden shore." Valandor bowed, yet in his heart he thought, if the light of the Valar was kindled for all the children of Ilúvatar, why should any be forbidden to behold it? It was not long before that thought grew into resolve. He gathered a company of 6 trusted sailors, men who shared his hunger for discovery. Their ship was named Elenar, Starflame, for Valandor had carved upon her prow the likeness of a burning star. They set sail in secret from the harbor of Andunia, when the moon was dark and the sea lay quiet as glass. For many days they sailed westward, beyond the sight of land, into waters where no chart guided them. The sea was strange there, deep beyond measure, and clear as crystal. By night, it glowed faintly beneath the stars, as though reflecting a light unseen by mortal eyes. On the 12th day, they entered a region where the wind died, and the sky grew pale with a mist that veiled sun and moon alike. The air was heavy, and their hearts were filled with unease. Then, from beneath the still surface, came a dim radiance, slow and rhythmic, like the beating of a vast heart. "Captain," murmured one of the crew, "this is the place of the fire." Valandor stood at the prow, his hair stirring in the windless air. "Amandil saw it, and lived long enough to speak of it," he said. "We will not turn back." He ordered the anchor dropped, but the chain fell without sound into the depths. The sea did not yield. It seemed almost solid, yet transparent as glass. Looking down, they beheld an abyss of light, a vast chasm where slow flames drifted like living stars. Then a voice came from the deep, soft, sorrowful, and near. "Why do you come again, children of the short years? Did the warnings of those before you fade like mist?" The crew fell to their knees in terror, for the sea itself seemed to speak. But Valandor, trembling, raised his eyes. "I seek the truth," he said. "If this fire is holy, then let it be known to us. If it is cursed, then let us bear witness and seal it forever." A stillness followed, and then the water before him began to rise. It took form, shaping itself into the likeness of a man robed in light, crowned with foam and flame. His face was veiled, but his voice was as the deep waters. "I am the echo of Eärendor," it said. "The flame I once sought to guard still sleeps, but it calls to all who hunger for what lies beyond their lot. You cannot bind it. It is woven into the heart of the world." Valandor bowed his head. "Then let me behold it, and be judged." The sea parted. For an instant he saw below him a shape vast and terrible, a crystal of fire, pulsing with colors no mortal eye had seen. It seemed both alive and aware. He reached out his hand toward it, though the others cried for him to stop. The flame rose to meet him. It did not burn, but it pierced him through with light. His mind filled with visions, the music of the Ainur, the forging of the stars, the sorrow of the Valar when the trees were slain. He saw the Silmarils, bright and perilous, and the wars that had followed their making. He saw Erendur's fall, Amandil's defiance, and his own face reflected in that endless chain of seekers doomed by the same desire. Then the vision broke. He fell to his knees, gasping, the glow fading from his eyes. The voice spoke once more, fainter now. You have seen what none of your kind should see. Go back to your people. Tell them that the fire endures, and that to reach for it is to reach for the ending of all things. The sea closed, and the light sank once more into silence. When the Elenar returned to Númenor, her sails were tattered, and her men hollow-eyed. Valandor spoke little of what had passed, save to say, "The fire is not for us." In the years that followed, he built no more ships and would not go to sea. Yet in the nights when storms came out of the west, he would wake and stare at the dark horizon, whispering words no one could understand. After his death, the sailors of Andunia said that the western waters glowed brighter than before, as though some of his spirit had joined the sleeping light. And those who still dared to sail that way swore they heard a voice among the waves, gentle but unyielding. No one should wield this power. And thus, even in peace, the sea remembered, holding in its depths the fire that could not die, and the dreams of those who had reached too far to touch it. Long after Valandor's voyage had faded into song, Númenor entered the fullness of its glory. Its towers gleamed white beneath the sun, and its harbors thronged with ships that sailed to every shore of Middle-earth. The kings of men grew proud, for no storm could best their mariners, and their might upon the sea seemed boundless. Yet even amid their splendor, the ancient fear remained, the fear of death, which no wisdom could cure and no voyage could outrun. In those days, many began to whisper of the gift of the West, saying that beyond the sea lay the secret of life everlasting. The Valar forbade the passage of mortal ships to the undying lands, but men's hearts are ever drawn toward what is forbidden. And so it was that, once more, the old hunger stirred. The same hunger that had led Erendur to ruin and had kindled in Amandil's line the dream of light. Among those who listened to the sea's whispers was Ardamir, captain of the royal fleet under King Ar-Pharazôn. Proud and fearless he was, a man of power and great renown. Yet unlike his king, who sought dominion over all the world, Ardamir's heart was troubled. He had sailed further west than any of his kin, and on the black nights when the waves were still, he had seen it, a glimmer deep beneath the surface, like a star drowned long ago. Once, when he stood alone upon the deck of his ship, he heard a voice borne upon the wind. It was faint and sorrowful, and it called his name. Ardamir. He turned, but there was none beside him. Only the sea, stretching endless and grey, and beneath it that faint, unearthly glow. He could not forget it. In secret he sought the counsel of the wise, but none dared speak of such things. The lore-masters of Andunia had long forbidden the study of the lost fire. Yet in the libraries of Romenna, Ardamir found an old scroll, faded and torn, written in the tongue of the Eldar. It spoke of Erendur, of Laerion, and of the fragment of the Silmaril that had been cast into the sea. At the end was written a single warning. The fire sleeps, but its dream shall outlast the world. The words haunted him. In the years that followed, as Ar-Pharazôn grew in pride and sought to rival even the Valar themselves, Ardamir felt the same madness creeping through his own heart. He began to dream of the light beneath the waves, of grasping it, mastering it, wielding it as a gift to free men from their doom. One night, as the moon lay hidden and the sea lay calm as glass, he gathered a few loyal mariners and set sail westward, swearing that no eye should see their passage. The voyage was long and perilous. The stars dimmed, the winds died, and the sea took on a strange stillness. At last, they came to waters where the world seemed to end. There the air was heavy with mist, and the sky merged with the sea in a single grey veil. Then they saw it, faint, trembling, a light far below, flickering like a heartbeat. "Behold!" whispered one of the sailors. "The fire of Eärendor!" Ardamir's heart raced. He ordered the ship to halt and cast anchor. The light grew brighter until the water shimmered as if the very stars had fallen into it. He leaned over the side, and his reflection stared back at him, touched by silver flame. For a moment he thought he saw another face beside his, that of a man, older, crowned with seaweed and sorrow. "Why do you seek what should remain forgotten?" said the reflection. Ardamir drew back, trembling. "Who speaks?" "I am the echo of those who came before, of Eärendor, who cast the shard into the sea, and of Valandor, who sought it in vain. You follow their path, and it will lead only to death." Ardamir's breath caught. "If it is death to seek a light, then I will embrace it. For what is life, if bound to the darkness of decay?" The sea shuddered. A wind rose, cold and sharp, and the light beneath the waves flared. The sailors cried out as the ship lurched, pulled by unseen hands. From the deep, a pillar of radiance burst forth, dazzling their eyes. It was the fire, pure, terrible, beautiful beyond mortal words. It danced above the water, and in its depths shapes moved. Forms of beings long lost to the world, singing in voices like the music of creation. Ardamir fell to his knees, weeping. "Grant me your light," he cried. "Let me bear it, not in pride, but in hope. Free us from the shadow of death." The light pulsed, and for an instant it seemed to hear him. A warmth spread through the air, gentle as dawn. Then the sea roared, and the fire changed. The brightness grew harsh, fierce, as though it remembered the touch of Feanor's hand, and the curse that followed it. "None may wield this fire," thundered a voice from within the flame. "It was born before the world, and it will end after it. You are but a shadow of its dream." But Ardamir, blinded by longing, reached forward. The fire struck him like a storm. His body was lifted from the deck and wreathed in light. His men fled, leaping into the sea, crying out in terror. For a heartbeat, Ardamir stood at the heart of the flame, his face transfigured, his eyes filled with stars. Then the light burst, and he was gone. The ship drifted, broken and silent. Only ash remained where he had stood. The men who survived returned to Númenor, their minds darkened by what they had seen. They spoke of a great light rising from the western sea, and of a voice that echoed through the wind, sorrowful, eternal, saying again and again, "No one should wield this power." From that day forth, the waters west of Númenor were shunned. Mariners who sailed near them heard whispers in the waves and saw faint fire gleaming beneath the foam. And so the tale passed again into myth. Yet always it returned, as it ever would. The tale of the light that could not die, the flame that called to mortal hearts, and the doom of those who reached for it. For even as the shadow of Númenor's fall grew nearer, the sea still remembered the fire, and in its depths the shard of the Silmaril slept, dreaming of the first song, awaiting the day when the hand of the world itself would wake it anew. The sea kept its secrets, though it murmured them to those who listened. Storms came and went, kings rose and fell, and still the fire beneath the waves endured, unquenchable, unseen. when Númenor fell at last, swallowed by the wrath of the Valar, the waters themselves seemed to burn. In that dreadful night, the deep foundations of the world shook, and the fire that had slept since Eärendur's time awoke in anguish. Some say it was that same ancient flame, not the wrath of Ilúvatar alone, that devoured the island of men, long after, when the sea had grown quiet again, and the realm of Gondor was young. The old tales returned in whispers among the mariners of Pelagia. They spoke of a light seen far to the west, beyond the shadow of the setting sun, a shimmer like silver glass that lingered above the waves. None who followed it returned, yet the dream of it endured, as all forbidden things endure in the hearts of men. In those days there lived a shipwright named Callanhar, a man of Númenorian blood, tall and keen-eyed. He dwelt near the mouths of Anduin, crafting vessels swift and strong, and his fame spread even to the halls of the kings. But Callanhar's heart was restless. He loved the sea, with a love both gentle and fierce. And often, standing upon the docks at dusk, he would gaze westward, where the horizon burned faintly gold. He had heard the old songs from his father's lips, songs of Eärendur and Valandor, of the fire that had once shone beneath the waves. One evening, when the wind lay still and the river mirrored the stars, Callanhar's father came to him. He was old and bent, but his eyes held the same sea-longing that burned in his son. "Do you know why we still dream of the West, child?" he asked. "Because in our blood lies remembrance of light beyond the world and of a promise lost." Callanhar smiled faintly. "And do you believe the fire is truly there, father?" The old man looked toward the dark horizon. "I have seen it," he whispered. "Once in my youth, when I sailed with the king's fleet beyond the sight of land. It was no dream, no mirage. A light moved beneath the water, slow and living, as if the sea itself drew breath. And I heard a voice, not in my ears, but in my heart. I fled it, and I have regretted my cowardice ever since." That night, Callanhar could not sleep. The river's whisper seemed to call his name, and the wind that crept through the shutters carried the scent of salt in far places. Before dawn, he went down to the shore and laid his hand upon the hull of the ship he had built with his own hands. Eärlin, the sea song. "She is ready," he murmured. Within a week, he had gathered a small crew, 6 men and a single woman, all bound by the same unspoken yearning. They set sail at sunset, leaving behind the white shores of Gondor. The people who watched them depart crossed their hands and prayed, for none who had gone seeking the western light had ever returned. The voyage was long, and the sea tested them. Winds rose from the south, fierce and sudden, and waves towered like walls. Yet Callanhar's skill held them fast, and his heart did not falter. Each night when the storm clouds broke, he stood upon the deck and searched the horizon for a glimmer that only he could see. At last, after many days, the air grew strange. The sea was calm, but heavy, as though something vast and hidden lay beneath it. A pale mist veiled the stars. Then, faint and far, a light began to glow beneath the surface, not bright, but clear, steady as the beating of a heart. Callanhar's breath caught. "We have found it," he said. The others stared in silence. Awe and dread mingled upon their faces. The light swelled, rising towards them, until the waves themselves shimmered with living flame. "Do not go nearer," cried one of the sailors. "This is the curse of the Valar." But Callanhar did not heed him. He guided the ship forward, his eyes fixed upon the glowing depths. He thought he heard music then, faint, distant, yet beautiful beyond all telling. It was the song of the beginning, the same that had shaped the stars. The sea parted. A column of water rose before them, and within it burned the fire. Pure, terrible, and infinitely sad. It was not as flame upon wood, but as light upon crystal, deep and unconsuming. A voice came from within the water, clear as the tolling of silver bells. "Why do you come, son of the fallen isle?" Calenhir bowed his head. "I seek to behold what my fathers sought, the truth of the fire that none may name." The voice replied, "Many have sought me. Eärendor bore me to the sea. Valandor gazed upon me. Ardamir perished in my light. Each was bound to the same desire, to grasp the flame that was before the world. But none may master it." Calenhir trembled, yet his heart burned with wonder. "Then what are you, if not a curse?" "I am the reflection of that which Eru set beyond reach," said the voice. "I am the echo of the Silmarils, the memory of their light. I sleep until the end, that the world may remember both beauty and pride." Calenhir looked into the depths and saw shapes moving there, faint as dreams, faces both fair and mournful. Among them was a man crowned with fire, his eyes full of sorrow. "Eärendor," he whispered. The figure inclined its head. "You have come far, but not for your own sake. Return to your people, Calenhir. The time of this world wanes. Guard its memory, for the fire will awaken once more, and with it will come both creation and ruin." Then the light began to fade. The sea closed, and the water grew still. The ship drifted in silence, beneath a sky that had never seemed so dark. For a long while, no one spoke. Then the woman of the crew said softly, "Captain, what did you see?" Calenhir looked toward the west, his eyes glistening with tears. "The beginning," he said, "and the end." They turned their sails eastward, and returned at last to the shores of Gondor. Calenhir spoke little of what he had witnessed, save to write these words upon the prow of his ship. No one should wield this power. Years later, when he was old, he built a small tower upon the coast, where he would stand each evening to watch the sunset. Those who passed that way said they saw a faint glow in his eyes, as if he still carried the reflection of a light unseen. And when at last he died, a strange calm fell upon the sea. The waves shimmered pale and soft, and a single star burned low upon the horizon, bright as a tear in the eye of the world. Thus the tale of the fire passed into the Third Age, no longer as history, but as legend, a whisper in the hearts of mariners, a warning to the proud, and a promise to the dreamers. For the sea remembers. Always it remembers. And deep beneath its darkened heart, the fire still sleeps, the last echo of the Silmarils, waiting for the day when the stars themselves shall fall, and the song of the beginning will rise again. Time passed into shadow, and the long years of Middle-earth rolled on like the tide. The glory of Númenor lay buried beneath the sea, and from its ruin the kingdoms of men had risen, flourished, and begun to fade. Yet still the western waters gleamed at times with a strange and living light, though few marked it now. The world had grown dimmer. The songs of the Eldar were vanishing from its shores, and the hearts of men turned eastward, seeking power in the lands of their dominion rather than in the mystery of the sea. But the sea remembered. Always it remembered. Far in the south, where the coasts of Gondor curved toward the shadowed waters of the Bay of Belfalas, there dwelt a mariner named Berethor, last of a long line of shipwrights who claimed descent from Calenhir of old. He lived in a small stone house above the harbor of Dol Amroth, where white gulls wheeled over the grey waves and the masts of ships swayed like reeds in the wind. Beretha was a quiet man, thoughtful and solitary. His hands were roughened by rope and salt, yet his eyes were bright and restless, as though they held the reflection of a distant light. He had grown up hearing the tales of his forefathers, stories of Erendur, Valandor, and Calanhir, each of whom had sought the same forbidden flame. His mother had told him, as all mothers of that line told their sons, "You must never go west, my child, for there lies the doom of our kin." But warnings are to the hearts of men what wind is to fire. They do not quench, but kindle. In the year when Berethor came into his full strength, a strange calm fell upon the sea. No storms troubled the coast that winter, and the fishermen brought home their nets heavy with silver catch. Yet at night, when the moon was hidden, the waters glowed faintly, as though starlight moved beneath the waves. The old sailors crossed themselves and spoke of omens. Some said that Ulmo was restless. Others whispered of the ancient fire stirring once more in the deeps. Berethor felt it in his dreams. He would wake in the dark hours before dawn, his heart pounding, the taste of salt upon his lips. In his sleep, he saw a light calling him across the endless water, a light that was neither of sun nor star. One night, unable to bear the longing, he went down to the harbor. The moon had set, and the world was silver-grey. The tide was high, whispering against the pier. He stood there for a long time, gazing westward, and at last he saw it, a gleam far beyond the reach of sight, small yet clear, as if some buried jewel had risen to the surface of the sea. "Erendur," he murmured, though he did not know why that name came to his lips. From that night onward, he could think of little else. His friends saw the change in him, how his gaze lingered upon the horizon, how he walked alone by the water, even when storms brewed. The harbour master warned him sternly, "The sea gives gifts only to take them back. Do not follow the ghosts of your blood." But Berethor smiled and said nothing. By midsummer, he had built a vessel of his own design, a small, swift ship with sails pale as gulls' wings, and a prow carved in the likeness of a flame. He named her Earflame, for in his heart he believed that some fragment of the Silmarils still burned beneath the western waves. When the wind turned westward one morning, he set sail alone. The people of Dol Amroth watched from the cliffs, shaking their heads. "Another fool," they said. "The sea will take him, as it took the rest." The first days of his voyage were fair. The wind was steady, the sky clear. He followed the path of the setting sun, steering by the stars when night fell. Yet each evening, as the darkness deepened, he saw again the glow beneath the waves, faint, pulsing, alive. It seemed to guide him, and he followed. On the seventh night, a mist rose from the sea, thick and cold. The stars vanished, and a silence fell so deep that even the creak of the timbers seemed distant. Then, through the fog, he saw a light rising, not beneath the water this time, but before him, like a beacon in the heart of the mist. It was beautiful beyond words, pure and terrible, a flame that did not burn, a light that seemed to pierce through the very soul. Berethor dropped to his knees upon the deck, tears streaming down his face. The light was calling to him. A voice spoke then, soft as the wind over the waves. "Son of the sea blood, why do you come?" Berethor lifted his head. "To see the truth of what my fathers sought, to know the fire that has haunted our line since the world was young." "Would you wield it?" asked the voice. He hesitated. "No, I would only understand it." "None who behold me are unchanged," the voice said, "for I am the echo of the fire imperishable, the breath of creation. Those who seek me do not return." "I have no wish to return," Beretha whispered. "If this is the end, then let it be a true one." The light flared, and for a moment the sea vanished. He stood not upon the deck, but in a place beyond the world, a vast expanse of silver flame. Shapes moved within it, shadows of things that had been and things yet to come. The trees of Valinor, the wars of the Silmarils, the fall of Númenor, and the doom that still awaited the world. And there, at the heart of the fire, he saw a figure, tall, radiant, and sorrowful. It was Erendur, or the memory of him, still bound to the flame he had cast into the sea. "Do you see now?" said the spirit. "This power was never meant for mortal hands. It is the song of the beginning and the ending." Beretha fell to his knees. "Then why does it call us still?" "Because the heart of man is made of the same fire," Erendur answered. "And so long as you live, you will hunger for it." The vision faded. The ship was gone. The sea stretched endless and dark around him. Yet his heart was filled with peace as the light sank once more into the deep. He whispered, "No one should wield this power." When dawn came, the people of Dol Amroth saw strange fire upon the western horizon, soft and white, like the glimmer of a star. It lingered for a single morning and was gone. The ear-flame never returned, nor was Beretha's body found. But the fishermen who sailed those waters in later years said that sometimes, in the hour before dawn, a single voice could be heard singing upon the waves, a song of sorrow and wonder, carried by the wind from the edge of the world. And those who heard it swore that the sea itself answered, whispering back in the tongue of the deep. No one should wield this power. Many ages had passed since Beretha's voyage, and the world had grown old. The elves had sailed westward and vanished beyond the bent sea. Their songs lingered only in the dreams of men. The great kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor had waned, their towers crumbled, and the might of Númenor's heirs had faded into memory. Yet the sea endured, vast and changeless, whispering the same ancient rhythm against every shore. And still, at times, it glimmered with a hidden light beneath its waves, like a pulse that the world had forgotten to still. In the days of the Fourth Age, when the shadow was long gone, but the hearts of men still reached for more than they were given, there lived a scholar and mariner named Elidor, son of Minas Tirith. He was not of noble birth, though he possessed a mind keen as a sword. From childhood he had studied the tales of the elder days, of the Valar, the Silmarils, and the lost Isle of Númenor. Yet above all, he was drawn to the story of the flame beneath the sea. He found fragments of it in crumbling scrolls, the remnants of lore long neglected. The old seafarers of Gondor still spoke, in whispers, of a light that stirred beneath the western waters, but most dismissed it as fable. Elidor did not. He felt that the sea was calling him, as it had called those before, Erendur, Valandor, Calanhir, Berethor, each of whom had vanished in pursuit of the same unearthly fire. "Perhaps," he said one evening to his companion, a woman named Miriel, "it is not a curse at all, but a promise. The fire may not be meant to destroy, but to remember, a fragment of the divine that was never lost." Miriel looked at him with sorrow in her eyes. "Many before you have spoken such words, and all were lost. Do not let their madness claim you, Elidor. The sea does not forgive." But his mind was fixed. He began to gather what lore he could, piecing together the accounts of the lost mariners. He found a map, ancient and half-burned, drawn by Calanhir himself, marking the path that led into the silent waters where no wind stirred. Upon its corner were carved the words, in an elven hand, "No one should wield this power." Elidor traced the words with his finger, feeling them burn into his memory. If it was meant never to be wielded, he murmured, then perhaps it was meant to be understood. When the spring came, he left Minas Tirith and journeyed down the Anduin to Pelargia, where ships still sailed the wide sea. There he found an old vessel, sturdy but forgotten, and repaired it with his own hands. He named it Silwen, Daughter of Light. Miriel, unwilling to let him go alone, joined him, though her heart was full of dread. Together they set out upon the western tide, the wind in their sails and the stars for their guide. For many days they sailed through calm seas, and the air was clear and bright. Yet as they passed beyond the sight of land, the world grew hushed, and the waters darkened. The nights were filled with strange dreams. Elidor heard faint singing in the depths, as though the ocean itself remembered a melody too great for mortal ears. On the 10th night, the stars dimmed, and a mist rose around them, silver and cold. The sea turned still as glass. Then far beneath, a faint gleam began to stir, a light deep and living, as though the heart of the world had begun to beat once more. Miriel clutched his arm. "We have come too far." Elidor's voice trembled with awe. "No, this is what I sought. Do you not see? The fire still lives." The light grew brighter, and the water beneath them glowed with a radiance that cast their faces in pale silver. Slowly, something vast began to take shape below, a form like a jewel of crystal and flame resting in the dark. Then the sea spoke. "Why do you disturb my sleep?" The voice was neither loud nor soft, but vast, a presence felt in the bones more than heard in the air. Elidor stood upon the deck, his heart racing. "I seek the truth. I seek to know the fire that none may wield." The voice answered, sorrowful and weary. "You seek what cannot be born. The fire you name was not forged by hands of flesh. It is the echo of the flame, imperishable, the breath of creation that no creature may master." Elidor's eyes filled with tears. "Then why does it remain in this world? Why call to us if it means only our undoing?" The sea rippled with light, and a shape rose slowly from its depths. A figure clad in shifting flame, a face both terrible and beautiful. It was the shade of Erendur, bound still to the fire he had cast away. "Because your kind was made from it," he said gently. "You are its children, and as long as you live, you will seek its light." Miriel fell to her knees. "If that is so, why destroy those who answer the call?" Erendur's gaze turned upon her, filled with pity. "The fire is not evil, nor is it kind. It is truth. And truth, when bared before mortal eyes, consumes as surely as flame consumes dry wood." Elidor stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Show me then. Let me see what my father saw, if only for a moment." The sea grew still. Then the water parted, and the light rose. It engulfed the ship, filling every shadow with brilliance. Elidor felt the world fall away. He saw the first dawn of Arda, the making of the stars, the mingling of the two trees. He saw the Silmarils blazing with the same light that burned before the beginning of time. He saw the hands of Feanor shaping them, proud and doomed, and the long sorrow that followed. And then he saw the end, the unmaking of the world, the fire returning to its source, the sea boiling away beneath the wrath of creation, reborn. When the vision passed, he lay upon the deck, weeping. The ship was whole, yet the light had dimmed. The sea was quiet once more. Erendur's voice lingered like a sigh. "Now you know. No one should wield this power, for it was never meant to be wielded, only remembered." As the dawn broke, Miriel found Elidor standing at the prow, his eyes empty of tears. "We will return," he said. "We will tell them to let it sleep." But as the wind filled their sails, she saw that the light of the fire still shone faintly within his gaze, a reflection of the glory that could not be forgotten. They came again to the shores of Gondor, and though many did not believe their tale, some among the learned trembled to hear it. Elidor sealed his writings and placed them in the archives of Minas Tirith, inscribing upon the final page the words that had echoed through every age of the world. No one should wield this power. Years later, when both he and Miriel were gone, the sailors of the West still told of the night the sea had shone like glass, and of the faint song that drifted upon the tide, a song of beginnings and endings, of loss and light, whispered forever beneath the waves. And those who listened long enough swore they heard the sea itself breathe, as if the heart of the world still beat below, waiting for the day when the fire would wake again. Long years had passed since Elidor's voyage, and though the world turned in peace, the sea's memory did not fade. The light that he had seen, that living spark beneath the waters, remained, sleeping but not dead. The ocean bore it like a heart carries grief, silent, hidden, yet unforgotten. Kingdoms rose and fell again, and the tongues of men changed. The tales of the elder days dwindled into myth, told by firelight to children who no longer believed that such glory had ever walked the earth. Yet some, in whom the blood of the Sea Kings still ran true, dreamed of distant lights upon the horizon, and woke with the sound of waves in their ears. It was in one such time that the world's edge was sought once more. The northern winds were strong that year, and ships of every kind roamed the wide seas, seeking trade, discovery, and fame. Among these seafarers was Uldur, captain of the ship Hirilonda, a man whose heart yearned for things forgotten. He was born in Dol Amroth, where the memory of elven friendship still lingered faintly in the air. From his youth, he had loved the stories of the lost mariners, Erendur, Calanhir, Elidor, each who had sailed west to find the light that no man could master. When Uldur was still a boy, his grandfather had placed a hand upon his shoulder and said, "The sea gives its gifts only to those it means to claim. Remember that, lad. There is no return for the chosen." But such warnings only deepened his resolve. Years later, Uldur came into command of his own vessel, a sleek ship of silvered wood and white sail. His crew were loyal, brave, and half in love with his madness, for they had followed him through storm and shadow more than once. Yet even they grew uneasy when, one evening, he stood upon the deck and gazed long toward the sunset, where a faint shimmer like starlight danced upon the waves. "The light calls again," he murmured. "It has never died." His first mate, a grizzled mariner named Dorlus, frowned. "Captain, that way lies only doom. The west is closed. The Valar's wrath still guards those waters." "Perhaps," said Uldur softly. "But perhaps the world has changed. The bent sea is not the same as it was in the days of wrath. The light we see may no longer be forbidden. Only waiting." Dorla spat over the railing. "Waiting for fools." But Uldur had already made his choice. Within the month, when the moon was new and the harbor lay wrapped in fog, Hirilonda slipped from its moorings and vanished into the dark. None marked her passing, save a handful of gulls that wheeled above the quiet sea. They sailed for many days into the west, through waters uncharted. The weather was strange. Winds that came and went without warning, seas that shimmered faintly at night as though lit from below. The crew whispered that the ocean itself watched them, and their songs turned to silence. Yet Uldur remained at the prow, tireless, his eyes fixed on the horizon. On the 14th night, they entered a region where the air lay still as stone. The stars above were pale, and the sea below was smooth as a mirror. Then, without sound, a glow awoke beneath the surface, soft at first, then growing, until the entire ocean seemed filled with light. The men fell to their knees, speechless with fear. "Behold," said Aldor, his voice trembling. "The fire lives yet." As he spoke, the light rose higher, swirling like a living storm beneath the waves. Then the sea parted, and a great wave lifted the ship upon its crest. At its heart burned a radiance so fierce that all turned their faces away. A voice, vast and sorrowful, filled the air. "Why do you seek me again, child of dust?" Was not the warning enough? Alda stood firm, though his heart shook. "We come not to claim you, but to understand. The fire that burns beneath the world, it has never ceased to call. Why do you haunt the hearts of men?" The voice answered, its tone deep as thunder beneath the deep. "Because men were kindled from the same spark. The flame imperishable lies in all your kind. It is your gift and your doom. You are ever drawn to your reflection, and it ever destroys you." Dorlus cried out, "Then end it! Let the fire perish, if it brings only death." But the sea laughed, a sound both mournful and strange. "You cannot end what was before ending itself. The fire sleeps until the last song, when all shall be remade. Until then, it lives, in the sea, in the stars, and in the hearts of all who dream." Then the light changed. It no longer burned with terrible splendor, but softened, turning to hues of gold and green. In its depths, they saw visions, the first dawns of Arda, the birth of the sun and moon, the coming of elves and men. They saw Numenor in its pride, white and fair before the fall, and they saw its ruin, the great isle swallowed by waves of fire. Aldor wept. "So much beauty, so much loss." The voice answered, "This is the price of creation, to love that which will fade. Even the Valar could not escape it." Then, from the light, a figure emerged, tall and radiant, his eyes like starlit seas. It was Erendur again, or the echo of his soul bound within the flame. "Turn back, Alder of the East," he said gently. "The fire is not for you, nor for any who dwell in Arda. Yet take this truth to your people, that light and darkness are not enemies, but kin. One cannot live without the other." Alder fell to his knees. "Will the fire ever die?" "When the world is broken and remade," said Erendur, "then it shall return to its source, and all that was divided shall be one." With those words, the sea grew calm, and the light sank once more into the deep. The ship drifted in silence beneath a sky newly filled with stars. None spoke for a long time. At last, Dorlus whispered, "We live still, Captain." Alder turned to him, his face pale and shining in the starlight. "Aye," he said softly, "but we will not be the same." When they returned to the shores of Gondor, the people marveled, for no ship that had sailed so far west had ever come home again. Alder spoke little of what he had seen. In his later years, he built a shrine above the cliffs, where he carved in white stone the words that had haunted every age since the making of the world. No one should wield this power. And when he died, they buried him there, facing the sea. Some say that on clear nights, when the tide is high and the stars are bright, a faint glow rises from the water below his tomb, a light that ebbs and returns, steady as the breath of the world itself. For though the ages pass, and kingdoms fall, and memory fades into song, the fire endures. It cannot die, for it is the heart of all that lives. And sometimes, in the stillness before dawn, the sea whispers once more, not in wrath nor in sorrow, but in remembrance of its first keeper. No one should wield this power. The ages wore thin, and the world that had once blazed with the songs of the valor grew dim. The elves were gone across the bent seas, and men ruled alone beneath the wheeling stars. The towers of old lay buried in moss, and the tongues of the west were all but forgotten. Yet still, when the night was still and the moon sailed high, the sea shimmered faintly as though some memory of light yet lingered in its depths. In those final years before the world's great changing, when the air itself felt heavy with waiting, there lived a wanderer known as Taran, a man with no house and no kin. He traveled the western coasts of Middle-earth, moving from village to village, telling tales of the elder days. The folk called him the last storyteller, for he spoke of things that no one remembered, of the glory of the two trees, of the burning of the ships at Loscar, and of the light that had once been trapped in jewels brighter than the sun. Most laughed at him and said he was mad, but the children listened, and so did the sea, for Taran carried something strange within him, a longing that burned like a quiet star. In his dreams, he often saw a fire sleeping beneath the waves, and a voice calling his name from beyond the mists. Sometimes he would wake to find the tide glowing faintly below his window, as if the ocean had crept close to listen. One night, as autumn winds swept the shores and rain fell in silver curtains, Taran took shelter in an abandoned tower overlooking the sea. The place was ancient, its stones worn smooth by centuries of storm. There, he built a small fire and unrolled his worn cloak. The wind rose higher, carrying with it the deep voice of the tide. And through the thunder and the surf, he heard words, faint but clear. Taran. He sat up, heart pounding. The name was his, but the voice was not of this world. It came from beyond the window, from the restless sea below. "Who calls me?" he whispered. The fire flickered, dimmed, and went out. In its place, a cold light filled the room, soft as moonlight, yet bright enough to make the air shimmer. It was not the light of flame, nor of star. It was older, deeper, the same light that had haunted the dreams of countless men before him. "Why do you linger, child of the end?" asked the voice. "The tale is nearly told. All that was begun is drawing to its close." Taran rose slowly, his breath misting in the air. "Who speaks? I know that light. I have told the stories of those who sought it. Erendur, Valandor, Calanhir, Elidor, Aldor. Are you the fire they found?" The light swelled, filling the tower until the very stones seemed to hum. "I am what remains of the first fire," it said. "I am the echo of creation, the spark that neither fades nor dies. Long have I slept beneath the waves, waiting for the world's last dawn." "Then why do you call to me?" asked Taran, trembling. "I am no king, no warrior, no mariner. I have no power to seek you." The light flickered gently. "You are the last of those who remember. When memory dies, the fire is forgotten, and the song of the world falters. You have carried the tale through the ages. Now it must end, not in flame, but in peace." Outside, the storm broke in full fury. The waves crashed against the cliffs, sending white spray through the window. Yet the light within the tower did not waver. Taran bowed his head. "What would you have of me?" The voice softened, filled with a strange kindness. "Come to me, as all your forebears did. Not to claim me, nor to bind me, but to return what was lost. Remembrance. The world grows weary, and even the sea forgets its beginning. You must remind it." Taran stepped to the window, The storm had stilled. The sea lay beneath him, vast and calm, glowing faintly as though with inner life. A path of light stretched from the shore into the horizon. He looked once more around the tower. "If I go," he whispered, "will I return?" "No," said the voice, "but your name will not fade. For the story that began in the fire of the Silmarils will end in the heart of one who remembers why they burned." Taran smiled, his eyes bright with tears. "Then it is enough." He descended the cliff and stood barefoot at the edge of the tide. The waves lapped about his feet, warm as breath. Slowly, he stepped forward. The water rose to his knees, his chest, his throat, and then it shone around him, wrapping him in radiance. The people of the nearby coast said that, at dawn, the storm clouds parted, and a pillar of light rose from the sea, stretching toward the heavens. It shimmered for a moment, then sank gently into the waves. When the fishermen climbed the cliffs, the old tower was empty, its fire long gone cold. But carved upon the wall, in letters that glowed faintly even by day, were these words: "No one should wield this power." Yet from that day onward, the sea grew calm. The tempests that had long plagued the western coast faded, and the waters gleamed with a soft light, as if the ocean itself had been set free from a burden it had carried for too long. The years rolled by, and Taran's tale passed into legend. Some said he had become one with the fire, joining the voices of those who had come before. Others believed the sea had taken pity on him and granted him rest beyond the circles of the world. But the wisest of the lawkeepers said this: the fire was not destroyed, nor was it kept. It was remembered, and in remembrance, it found peace. And so ended the long tale of the Silmarils' last echo, the flame that none could wield. The world turned on, slower now, softer, and the sea whispered still, though no one living could understand its tongue. Yet sometimes, on clear nights, when the air is still and the stars burn low, sailors far out on the western waters see a shimmer pass beneath their ships, a glimmer like the reflection of a star deep below. And if they listen very closely, above the hush of the tide, they hear a voice, quiet as breath, ancient as the world, whispering its final truth to the dark. No one should wield this power. And then the sea is silent once more, keeping its vigil until the end of days.